We're on your side tonight honoring Black History Month. At 7:30, we believe it is important to share Black history no matter the month of the year here in the Carolinas. Cecil Williams does that too. He has dedicated his life to the civil rights movement in South Carolina. Williams is a respected journalist, author, and photographer. He has turned his photography studio into a place of learning. It shows us the plight of the disenfranchised, and he recently sat down with our Steve Crump. He shares the power of his many pictures.
Behind the doors of 1865 Lake Drive in Orangeburg, South Carolina, one man's cherished memories are fueling flashbacks of America's unsettled past.
I learned to really be somewhat of an inquisitive journalist.
Demonstrating the urgent need for better schools connected to the Briggs versus Elliott case, which involved the legendary Thurgood Marshall, along with documenting John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign, Cecil Williams isn't shy in sharing his photographic journey. Admirable talents took root as a teenager in the 1950s, and this man's drive remained strong well into his 80s, preserving first-hand experiences linked to civil rights and African American history is an obsession during life's sunset years.
I started covering the Harvey Gantt story before the national press, of course, kind of discovers Harvey Gantt.
Harvey Gantt stepped from the car, surrounded by reporters and photographers from all over the country.
On a frigid February day in 1963, Williams, spotlighted here, scored a prized moment.
I got up on the steps of Tillman Hall and photographed Harvey Gantt, but also surrounded by 150 journalists who had come from around the world really to cover this story.
20 years later, Gantt was elected as Charlotte's first African-American mayor, and the public battle to integrate Clemson University commands significant wall space in the Cecil Williams, South Carolina Civil Rights Museum.
But here are 5 of the original shells that led to the death of 3 students and the injuring of 28 others.
Among his gripping artifacts and pictures are spent shell casings he found scattered on the ground from weapons fired by members of the Highway Patrol at South Carolina State University in Orangeburg. That's where student demonstrations during 1968 intended to end segregation at the town's all-white bowling alley before things turned deadly.
We had extreme and overt racism.
Rebelling against what he calls a racist symbol, Williams also showcased the Confederate battle flag flying over the State House dome during the 1960s. And back in 2000, his work brought attention to activists fighting to bring down the symbol of Dixie some 15 years before it was officially removed.
Here was a picture showing human dignity carried by one of the protesters, along with Coretta Scott King.
Photographing Coretta Scott King's public appearance during the 1969 Charleston hospital workers' strike surfaced as the cover story for Jet magazine. 13 months earlier, in April of 1968, violence claimed the life of her husband, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.
For the first time since the death of her husband, Martin Luther King, again appeared at an event which signaled really the fact that she would be following in his footsteps.
Timeless and moving perspectives, all connected to a museum that survives as a one-man operation.
In this space, we feel that we tell the story. Combined is the story of the South Carolina civil rights movement.
So powerful. And Steve joins us here in studio to talk more about this. I mean, he has been on the front lines of all of these, capturing these images for us. And I know you want to thank him for the access he gave you.
Absolutely, the access and the permission to use those images. But Jamie, you nailed it. I mean, he's been out there decade after decade after decade.
Wow. There's something about a still photo too, right? So as you're walking through that place, you know, what sort of hit you?
I think it's what did he have to go through as a journalist to get the access to some of those? How does it impact African Americans? And the fact of the matter is, he is a storyteller, but he's a storyteller with the senses. I mean, so many respects, far as what it is he does, transcends a lot of things. Is sight, you're able, I guess some people will say in our business, shoot with your ear. What is he hearing as he frames, a photo?
Well, and you think about the bravery of those photographers in many of those situations.
Oh, and it was hostile. It was a hostile, especially for African-American photographers. I mean, people from the Ebonies and the Jets and the Pittsburgh Courier and the Baltimore Afro-American, many of the leading African-American publications in the civil rights movement, their cameras were attacked, their film was ripped out, and some of those pictures just didn't make it.
Yeah, and we wouldn't know about so many of these things, right, if they hadn't been there to click that shot. And I noticed, because I went through this here, I was watching online here, he's preserving photos as well. What's he doing there?
Look, for a guy that is in his 80s, he is on the cutting edge, even beyond the preserving. If you can't make it to the museum, well, he's already set it up virtually online. Bottom line here, if we can roll the tape from the standpoint of what you can see inside, that's what the inside of his museum looks like, room by room, and in many respects, some of those events that he's covered during those very turbulent decades, there's Orangeburg right there, he brings it to us frame by frame. So if you can't make it down to Orangeburg, we got a link on our website, wbtv.com, which will take you directly to Cecil's museum, and you can see the inside of it. And the thing that is so interesting, you talk about a committed individual far as being down with the cause. He does this for the most part out of his own pocket.
Wow, that's incredible work. I did the virtual tour today. After
Is that right?
Yeah, when I saw it was in your story, I wanted to go see it. It is really worth your time to go do. Fascinating work, fascinating insight. Thanks for sharing it with us, Steve.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Absolutely. Again, you can do that virtual tour online. Again, as Steve mentioned, we've got a link up there for you. All you got to do is scan the QR code that you see right there. You tap Web Extras. We'll get you right to it. It is definitely worth your time. Again, Steve, thank you, as always.